Hey, Feargal, Happy New Year. This is my first podcast, David Anderson talking market data in 2026.
I love
There will
it.
be a
It's
recording
great
of
to be here.
Tim Baker before you, but I recorded that before Christmas. Feargal, it's
I'm
great
flattered.
to
Yeah.
have you on the show. So,
Thank
I
you.
mean, we chatted briefly before that. We
Yeah.
talked about what we're going to talk about, but we avoided getting into the conversation itself. But one bit we did do is we talked a little bit about past history and whatever, and I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile sort of
Okay.
on the description so people can look into that.
hmm
But as you noted, we had some shared experiences on other sides of the Atlantic at
Yeah.
Reuters or what have you. And again, we were reminiscing about Tibco
Uh-huh.
Finance and that
Yeah.
world. And I presume your stint at NYSE
Yeah.
Technologies, was that
Yeah.
post Wombat, or was it was the Wombat stuff that was then owned by NYSE Technologies? Is that
Yeah. I joined. They acquired Wombat about a year before I joined,
right?
and then I knew several of the people there, so they had sort of called me up and said, "Are you
Was
interested?"
this
And
the
then
Irish mafia? This is Danny Moore
it
and
was
Tony
actually Tim
McManus.
Yockel who I
All
used to
right.
work with at Reuters. So yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not the
But yes,
Irish.
the Irish mafia were there.
There's a bit of that out there. So
Yeah.
look, so again, a long pedigree that you've had in the market
Yeah.
data industry, but you now operate USAM.
Correct.
And was it Sales Slice? Did I was
Sales Slicer as well.
Sales
Yes.
Slicer
Yes.
as well are
Yeah.
your sort of two companies
Two.
out there?
Correct.
Which I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what you do. You tell me to talk. You,
Sure.
Sam, what is it?
Yeah. So USAM is a sales agency, and basically the idea I got it from working at the larger companies. You mentioned Reuters and New York Stock Exchange; those are probably my two defining career in the large corporate world. And they had a model for going to market where you had this shared sales and marketing function, and then you had vertical business lines, and each of the business lines would have to come in and sort of fight for attention from the sales and marketing teams. But it was very effective for a range of reasons, including that it meant when the sales people were engaged with their clients, they weren't just going in selling one thing. They were actually able to go in and have a conversation about the challenges that the client was facing, and then say, oh, if you're having that problem, we should bring somebody from this business line or from that other business line. And then they'd be able to sell, an actual solution to a problem as opposed to shoving a piece of product
Individual
down their
products.
throat.
Yeah. I mean,
And so I liked that model, and I thought, it would be interesting to try to replicate it for earlier stage companies. So, if you think about it, there's some fantastic startups, people who have amazing experiences working at big companies. They see a hole in the market. They form their own company to address it. But, it's very expensive to hire salespeople. So my idea was, well, why don't we just bring together an experienced sales and marketing function, and then share the cost of it with several of those firms. So just the way a big corporation has different business lines, USAM actually is the exact same model, only we have individual companies instead of individual business lines.
right. But you're
So
acting as
that was
that
really the idea. And
Yeah.
now we have, basically about 10 salespeople spread around in different places in the world who are able to engage on behalf of a range of different software or data products that clients might need, and therefore give them a solution.
We're going to drill down into that a bit more in the second part, because again,
Excellent.
I threw at you as a sort of rough structure for this conversation. First of all, I wanted to pick your brains about the market data industry in general. But then the second part is really focusing on your specialization, the area of sales, not just into market data, but for the purposes of this podcast, market data is
Sure.
the topic. So
Yeah.
we'll delve into that later on. But kicking off, I mean, I'm again, it's taking me a bit of a while to wake up in 2026, having had the whole of Christmas and the New Year off. So getting my head back into gear about sort of market data. I mean, what are you seeing? What are the sort of hot themes
Mm,
in in what that we're going to be facing in 2026 that really were teed up during the course of 2025 and the years before that. I mean,
sure.
to be blunt, a lot of the issues, in my humble opinion, in market data have been with us for donkey's years. They don't change that much.
I mean, really, that was going to be my primary point, David. So you've beaten me
I've
to it.
stolen
We
your
can end the
thunder.
podcast now. But no, I mean, I've been at it for strictly what is it, 97, so almost 30 years, right? When I joined Tibco, and even at BlackRock, I was messing around with some teller rates and things like that.
Who I used to work for.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was down at, I was in Chicago for the FISD event back in, I want to say it was like September. They
Yeah,
had one at the CME,
I was there.
and I
I
think
was there.
you even introduced it very well, emceed it excellently. And, they were talking about, they had one of the vendors in who had consolidated a lot of the providers, the company's Exegy, and they've pulled together. That I think is one of the big trends of the last year or two that has made a difference. Is there used to be about five or six, pretty successful but limited vendors that, other than the big players, right? The
Yeah.
Bloombergs and the Reuters and the big and the LSEGs on the high end, but you had these five or six sort of smaller firms. That's been consolidated a lot now. And I think it's a little better off. So anyway, Exergy were pitching their platform, and they were describing literally everything I was describing about Tibco back in 1998.
I
Hadn't changed at all. Delay data, historical data, snapshot data, streaming data, conflated data. I mean, everything. I'm just like, yeah, okay. The
it
more
it
things
it
change, the more they stay the
I
same.
know, I know. I mean, I've been trying to draw diagrams of a market data system with, feed handlers and
Mm.
distribution,
Yeah.
and really it is the same. I mean, I think even with I mean, I started off my side on the Triarch side of things, and I think an awful lot of
Yeah.
the Triarch, which is
Yeah.
from the 1990s and
Yeah.
1980s stuff, still
Yeah.
exists in, was it
Totally.
TREP, and now it's RTD. I think little bits of
Yeah.
software are still lurking
Oh,
there.
for sure. For
Um,
sure. There's old code out there that's nobody knows how it does it. It
well,
just does it. Leave it alone.
but again, I'll use what you said as a tee up, because that project, the thing you came to in Chicago,
Mm,
is the
mm.
FISD engineering stream, and it was
Yes.
designed as a parallel stream of discussions with a more engineering element to it.
Yeah.
Um, in parallel to the main FISD program, which is perhaps talking about more commercial type issues, which we're going to come on to in a
Yes.
second.
Yeah.
But but I was struggling with this word engineering, and again, you talk about
Mm.
Exeter, you talk about your time at NISE Technologies. I think about
Yeah.
Triarch and Tibco. It's
Yeah.
all the plumbing. There was this whole
Hmm.
plumbing dimension
Yeah.
to market data coming in at one end and then being redistributed around lots of users, and that's what I lived. I mean, that was my focus for many
Sure.
years. But then
Yeah.
there's this other concept called data engineering,
Mm.
which I'm sort of beginning to hear people talk about, which is,
Yeah.
forget about the plumbing. The plumbing sort of works, low latency, all that. Oh, forget
Yeah.
about that. Once
Mm.
once an
Mm.
application
Yeah.
has got hold of that data
Yeah.
via the plumbing,
Mm.
how is that data structured? How is that data set
Exactly.
up to to have work done to it, to have
Yeah.
insights drawn from it? To another phrase I only heard recently, apps and strats. I think, which is applications and
Okay.
strategies, which is a very hedge fundy type phrase.
Sure.
Apparently, I'd never heard of
Yes.
it because it's not from my plumbing world. Um,
Yes.
but I put on top of my list AI.
Yeah.
And it's this we've got AI hot topic all last year. And I think it's going to be a topic all
Oh,
this year. It's
yes.
not just in market. I mean, let's face it,
No, of
AI
course.
is a topic in every aspect of our
Everywhere.
lives at the moment. But in
Yeah.
in the market data industry, it's
Yeah.
all that plumbing that you and I have worked on over many years gets the data to a point, but then
Yeah.
at that point, what are you hearing, seeing,
Yeah.
thinking?
I mean, look, I think you're headed into the most interesting aspect of it now, because not that plumbing stuff is not going away, and it's still critical. And really, the big thing is if you look at sort of the market data volumes, the charts just keep growing
Yeah.
exponentially, and they always look the same. If you take the current chart of like the last, 2025, 24, 23, and then it sort of curls down. It looks like there wasn't a lot going on in 2019 or something. But if you looked at the chart of 2019, it looks identical to the chart from last year. So, they always feel like they're growing. So the plumbing stuff is still getting huge attention and huge focus and a lot of time and effort. But that's mostly for being able to handle the volumes, and then for that top layer of people in the low latency space where
Yeah.
it'll never change. That's just going to remain critical for them. But for everyone else, it's that sort of data preparation stuff you were hinting at, and getting it ready for AI. And what's very interesting about financial services is that we've had data and information at the core of the business since the earliest days. And in technology, then we were tended to be quite advanced over many of the other industries. That
Yeah.
definitely rebalanced, and probably around when cloud started taking off and the iPhone and all that, other industries truly caught up, and some even exceeded us. But one of the things that we still have in financial services that's quite unique is very structured data, because we were working with systems that couldn't be this sort of throw mud at the wall and see what sticks, right? It had to be accurate. And we have structured data going back for decades, but things change along the way. So, the exchanges merge, they add new markets, they add new fields to the data, they come up with new trade types, they come up with new instruments. The technology itself changes. So what they were sending out before in one data format, might have been great at the time, but, we've come up with better compression techniques or new ways of managing that. And so they changed the data format. And what you were hinting at is really in that data preparation space is how do you take all the different data sets from all the different providers, through all the different distributors to all the different applications that need them, and then ultimately to the end user who's making a decision to buy or sell, or algorithm even, right? It doesn't have to be a person now, and yet balance or match up the data so that we are truly comparing apples to apples when it comes to a quote from last week versus 10 years ago, or from one market over a different market. And there's a huge amount of work going into trying to provide the strats clean data. And by clean, it's not like it was clean, we captured it, it's exactly what came out of the exchange, but it doesn't match with what's coming out of the exchange now or a year ago or 2 years ago. And so trying to line it up so that it's consistent for everyone, that is where there's a massive amount of time and effort.
And I mean, I had a recent experience. I've been heavily using ChatGPT. I paid me 20
Okay.
quid a month or something, and I love
Uh-huh.
all the way you can ask it questions with sophisticated
Sure.
prompts or whatever. But I'm going up to London tomorrow. My daughter's 28th birthday, and we're going up to Rules, the
Excellent.
oldest
Happy
London
birthday.
restaurant in
Yeah.
London. Anyway, and I was trying to
Mhm.
work out trains from Haywards Heath to Victoria. I thought, oh, I won't bother looking up Southern Rail. I'll ask ChatGPT, what's the first
Yeah.
train after the peak hour? Da, da. And it came back with all these, 9:26, and then da, da, da. And my wife said, that doesn't seem right. Anyway, long
Sounds
story
right.
short, I went to Southern Timetable, the railway company that
The
runs that,
real timetable,
and it
yeah.
was a completely different timetable. So
Yeah.
ChatGPT had just completely hallucinated,
Mhm.
and I mean, I use it. I think for a lot of text-based information, natural language, it's very
Yes.
good. But I think if you have a railway timetable is a very structured bit
Mm.
of data, and it
Yeah,
failed
and I
miserably.
mean, I think there could be two parts to that. One of it is that they're not always up to date,
Yeah,
on everything like ChatGPT or whatever. It's trained on data that
yeah,
can be up to a year old. I don't know how, like, they theoretically, like, if you ask it for the weather, it's not taking a year-old weather report. Okay. So it should be going and getting
but
the
it's
accurate, up-to-date timetable, but maybe we can't be totally confident that Southern and Western Railways is covered.
yeah, but I think
um,
isn't it the fact that some of these large language models, some of it isn't as good at maths as it
yes,
is. I mean, it's a large language model.
correct.
It's a slightly different model. So again,
Yeah,
uh,
they're known not to be perfect at math, and also, you know, they're they're a
yeah,
probabilistic
probabilistic
method,
as
right?
opposed, yeah,
So they do hallucinate, and you do need to be careful, and you do want to double check. Like, I wouldn't, operate on that part of my heart
yeah.
just because the AI said it,
I know.
right?
But I think so.
um,
So I think that's an interesting strand. The actual mechanics of we in the market data industry, when the data has been delivered by the plumbing. I
mm,
don't think there's an AI dimension to the plumbing, but we maybe I don't think there
not
is. But
not much,
yeah,
not much.
but the
Yeah,
interpretation of the data, the water that's pouring out at the end, I think
yes,
AI has some great opportunities, but some worries that I just highlighted in my mind. But then there's another
yeah.
whole dimension. I don't know if you get to see or think about this, the intellectual property rights issue. And
Mm.
this goes on in the wider world, not just in market data, where people are
Oh,
talking about, well,
absolutely.
hang on, you've trained your models on all this data, all these books, all these, and really you're not honoring intellectual property rights, copyright and royalties and
Correct.
payments to artists and payments to writers and what have you. And in our industry, I mean, things like derived data
Yeah.
is a phrase. I put data licensing and the complexities of data licensing. It's a
Mm,
hot topic because anybody who is a data owner, a data creator,
mm,
they spit their data out and they want to be paid for it. But sometimes their data gets merged with other people's data and calculated upon and so on. And at some
mm,
point, it's being changed and morphed into something different.
mm.
But invariably, that original data owner still wants to be paid something because they
Correct.
think they put their effort into it. And I don't
Yeah.
know. Again, I mean, maybe that's a segue. I mean, what's your, in your world, do
Yeah.
you get much tangled up in the whole data licensing
Oh,
debate?
for sure. Yeah, yeah. No, so we sell a couple of different vendors in the space now.
Yeah,
One is a low latency play, Quincy Market Data,
right.
and that is focused on the high frequency trading
Yeah,
companies, right? But that's coming down the pyramid or whatever. We're starting to get to the point where more ordinary players are dabbling in that as well. And then we work with a company called thescreener.com. They do a retail version. So we've literally gone from the extreme of performance to the lowest. Over the years, we've worked with several companies. Data BP, who's one of the guys
yeah,
who licensed those things out, are a big one. We work with TRG Screen and Accent
yeah.
Financial. So, they're selling the tools for managing the market data licenses. So yeah, I'm pretty well exposed to most of the things that are going on, and the bottom line is that um, everybody is trying to get their pound of flesh and then some. Right. And I would say a lot of the time it's absolutely warranted. Like, if I went to the trouble of inventing an index or calculation or some value added capability, source of data, and I put the trouble of putting it together, and then you just take it and quote it in your research report, I think you should pay me for that. Other times it's like, well, I distributed the NYSE market data feed to you, and then you used it to calculate a risk thing, and then you put that in your report, and now you owe me for the underlying thing. And then you start to wonder, like, wow, are you getting a bit greedy? Uh, so I think there's a balance, and I'm not sure we'll ever find it. But it goes down to negotiations, and when people, are dealing with their vendors and providers, they better really analyze those contracts extremely carefully and make sure that they are licensed to do what they say or what they're intending to do, because the vendors are known and will, and presumably correctly, will come and fine you for misusing their
I know.
data.
Yeah, because I mean, I've often observed, and it's slightly sad. I think there has been a breakdown in trust, if I can put it that
Yeah,
way, over the years. I mean, the vendors, they love their customers. If you talk, oh, we love our customers, they're
sure.
wonderful. But in reality, when you pin them down, they don't trust their customers. They're saying,
Yeah,
well, we've got all these checks and balances to make sure that our customers are paying us the correct money.
yeah,
Um, and I think equally the customers, you use that word greedy, the customers feel they're being overly
yeah,
taxed or charged or whatever. I mean, there's an ongoing theme, isn't there? Which is,
yeah,
and again, love to hear your thoughts on it, that the amount of money flowing through our industry just keeps growing. There is, if you talk to
yeah,
the banks and the buy side, they want costs to be cut. They are constantly
yeah.
trying to control and reduce how much they spend. But in
Mm,
reality, if you watch the Burton Taylor reports or whatever, I mean, the
mm.
industry keeps spending more money, and there seem to be a
Correct.
contradiction there.
Yeah, but there's also, you have to remember, like, it is all about disambiguation of data and data timelines. So if I can get a piece of information that somebody else doesn't have ahead of whenever they have it, and figure out how to use that to make a better trading decision, then I'm going to be the profitable one and I'm going to survive. And so, as much as everybody gives out about how much they're paying for the data feeds, they are often seriously trying to find some kind of edge or unique angle that nobody else has. And sometimes you can do it by just signing up for a Bloomberg and getting your 2-second data and being happy with it because you find some weird thing off in the corner that nobody else knew about and you trade that. Other times you want to go for the lowest latency possible. But in general, you're looking for something a little different and a little unique. And that can be understanding the market microstructure better than your competitors. But it can also go into finding alternative data sets, which are, again, less latency sensitive, but can be quite insightful when it comes to trading strategies, you
Well,
know?
I mean, that alternative data space, which has been
Mm.
operating, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. It's been
Yeah,
around for a while. We
quite a
had
while.
one of our big WIFIC conferences, the World
Yeah,
Financial Information Conference in Vancouver, which is, that's 6 years ago, actually,
yeah, 2019, yeah.
2019, pre-COVID.
Mm.
And I remember on a panel where they were discussing alternative data, and somebody said, "What's going to happen with alternative data?" And somebody on the panel said, "Well, I think we'll drop the word alternative." Because it is a bit, what do you mean alternative?
Yeah.
Alternative to what? It's data. It's all
Yes.
data.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think what maybe you and I have grown up with, a lot of what we're doing is the sort of real time pricing,
Pricing.
the price of
Yeah.
something. But then
Yes.
there's all this other data
Yeah.
which helps you to understand the directionality of that price. Because you're
Correct.
trying to understand supply and demand and economics and a
Yeah.
whole range of things way over my head.
Mm.
But
And that's
alternate.
where AI is proving to be valuable because
Yeah,
it is a pattern matching, engine, let's say, and that is something that it's tedious for a person to have to go through. I don't know, reports of photographs of cars
yeah.
parked
Or
outside Walmart and
summarization,
all.
as you say, it's pattern recognition,
Yeah.
but summarization seems to be the big skill of
Yeah.
AI.
But
Got all
even,
this.
I mean, they're even doing things. They're able to like take photos of the crops and so on, and like on from satellites, right? So wide scale, massive photograph, which a person's not really going to be able to read over, right? And then scan and see which regions are doing better than others and all the rest. I mean, these are things that are absolutely impacting trading already, and I think they're going to be there people are going to find new ways. And by the way, the half life of a new trading strategy is getting shorter and shorter, right? So you find this thing, you start trading, and people go, "How are they doing that?" Next thing, they've figured it out, they're copying you, and you move on. So that's why alternative data probably. Something was alternative, then becomes mainstream, but there's somebody looking for the next
It's
bit of alternative.
I know it and it ever was thus. I mean, I've got this great new invention called the telephone that you could,
Yeah.
and then everybody has the telephone, so it's ubiquitous, but you can't do without it. And it's like these things become a requirement, a commodity, if you will. And then it's always
Sure.
the other thing that is the new edge, and what have
Yeah.
you. Let me throw another phrase at you: value-based pricing.
I
This
love it.
concept, and I think I'll throw into the mix some of the
Mm,
conversations that have gone on in Europe about the consolidated tape, which is,
mm,
for anybody who doesn't understand it, all the,
mm,
if you want to look at the European equities markets, you've got to look at loads and loads of different exchanges.
indeed.
And the European Union is saying, no, there must be one single pipe, one single
Yeah.
view of the entire European EU market. But the,
Mhm.
the, the interesting point is that they think this should be priced on the basis of cost plus what it cost all those exchanges to produce,
Yeah.
plus a reasonable margin,
Sure.
which is different from the concept of market pull or value-based pricing, saying, look, Mr. Customer, how valuable is this to you? And,
Yes.
and and me judging that and saying, well, it only cost me £5 to make it, but I'm going to sell it to you for £100,
Yeah.
because it's worth a
You're
hundred
willing to pay.
pound.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how in
Well,
your
look,
world of
there always has to be a balance. I think the challenge with something like a consolidated tape is that if you're regulating it, then you should regulate the price, right? I mean, you're saying to everybody, okay, these are official exchanges of our individual countries. We've put a protection around a legal protection. They are the places to go to trade. Yes, you could start a new one if you want, but you will then fit into that regime of regulatory management control. So it's a barrier to entry that we've given these firms. And in return, if we say to them, well, give us back your prices in a consolidated way, which doesn't prevent you from also selling your dedicated feeds with maybe some
yeah.
other advantage to them, right? But we just want a good way that everybody can see the price and decide whether they're interested in trading or not without costing an arm or a leg. It's, in my view, it would be pretty reasonable to say it's a cost plus model in that scenario.
And I think
Um,
it's that regulatory dimension, isn't it?
yeah,
There's an idea that this should be available. I think what the regulators are trying to say is they want a more efficient and effective market with equal access to everybody.
yeah,
But you talk about your Quincy data, HFT, high
sure,
frequency trading. I mean, everybody wants an unfair advantage. Well,
sure.
everybody wants an advantage. I threw in the
They
word
want an
unfair.
advantage, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, look, the Quincy stuff is different because, again, you can go to an exchange and get a different version of a feed from them too, right? And they might say, we have this other way of getting you stuff, by the way, and it gives you this other advantage. Now, the issue with time and latency, which is really where Quincy plays, is as old as the hills, and it will remain, particularly as all these markets are in different locations and different places, which they are, not just to enable high frequency trading. They're there for political and social reasons too, and so if somebody can go to the trouble of getting a price from one of those to the other and put a lot of time and effort and money and brains, I mean, some of those trading firms, yeah, they make a ridiculous amount of money, but they've now it's the barrier to entry for them is so high just because of price. Quincy's helping with that because it lowers down. Again, it's sort of like USAM, sharing the cost with
Yeah.
multiple clients as opposed to forcing them to build their own network. But that's not going to go away, and I don't think it should. Some people say, well, the high frequency guys do market making, and then that's a value, and there's certainly a certain amount of truth to that.
Because I mean,
Maybe to be,
there has been a bit
yeah,
of controversy about high frequency trading
mm,
or low latency, beating people to the
yeah,
punch, whatever. I mean, I throw in the word unfair wrongly to say unfair because it should be
no,
a
yeah,
fair advantage. But I
yeah.
suppose you can buy advantage. Advantage costs you money.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you don't even need to have a network. You can just go into any one of the data centers, right? Co-locate with your exchange of choice, and then Again, even in the cases where it's equidistant to the matching engine and first in, first out, and all the rest of those rules. And if you come up with a faster algorithm, you win. It's like, so, to try to say that, well, that getting the data faster because you went to the trouble of all of that, to me, you can't, pick and choose those. I think you have to stick with, we're enabling both. We want that innovation. We want people to try harder. We want people to make more. The real trick is when all these guys, Citadel and Virtu and everybody were taking off, why didn't everybody else get in on it? They let them get the advantage, and that's that.
I know. And then off to the races they went. I
Yeah.
think this is a good segue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could talk for hours. I can talk for hours, I'm sure, about the market data industry in general. But I
Yeah.
think the specific angle that you're in is in that sales angle. I mean, I
Yeah.
was a salesman for 14 years, but then I
Yeah.
moved into marketing, and then
Yes.
although I suppose I do selling in FISD, but
Of course.
I'm not a hardcore sales professional anymore.
Yeah.
But it's interesting watching sales sort of go on in our industry, and I mean, there's a million things we could talk about. So I mean, I'm
Totally.
just going to sort of dart around. I've got this observation in our industry. I've seen it. I've been 41 years in the industry,
Yeah.
and I worked for Telerate, and
Yeah.
Telerate were against Roy. There were a myriad of different providers out there. There were a myriad of exchanges. There were loads of different banks. And slowly, over my 41 years, you've ended up with this, I think some would argue, the sort of duopoly on the market data vendor with
Mm.
the Reuters, now Refinitiv LSEG
That was
and
very good.
Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Um, and even the exchanges, NYSE. I mean,
Yeah.
NYSE took over various things. I know NYSE at one point owned Euronext. I know they've divested, but then
Yes.
Euronext in Europe is a big conglomerate.
Itself now.
And
Yeah.
and I mean the bulge bracket banks. I mean, what are
Mm.
there 11 or 12 now? After
Yeah.
UBS and Credit Suisse merged.
Just
Yeah.
keeps shrinking.
So you've got these enormous
Yeah.
entities selling stuff and these
Mm.
other enormous entities buying stuff.
Yeah.
And I worry that is that a real market in a true,
Yeah.
perfect competition economic market context? And you're selling in that environment. And I would imagine the other element that I'm curious about is, well, it's something I've learned. The long tail,
Yes.
which is where I've talked to my friends on the customer side. I was trying to sell something myself to somebody,
Okay. Yeah.
and I said, David, we love you, but we just can't take on another small vendor. It's
Yeah.
just so painful
Correct.
onboarding vendors.
Yes.
Um, I'm seeing. I mean, if you're a SME, a small, medium-sized company
Enterprise.
selling stuff. I won't
Yeah.
use the word vendor because that implies data vendor. You could be
Sure.
technology, it could be services, it could be data. I
Yeah.
mean, isn't it incredibly difficult to compete with the big players?
It truly is, and I'm going to be honest. I think it's getting worse. It's getting harder and harder.
And I
Um,
mean, character. What? Why? I mean, what? I believe it, but I'm curious what your perception of it is.
yeah. No. Look, the financialization of our economy has been pretty extreme over the last 25, 30 years, to the point now that, like, if you're a startup, you have to get VC backing. You have to have 15 million, or you're not, people won't even look at you.
Credibility. Yeah.
Right? The it just it's a whole range of things, but the interest rates been so low for so long allowed a lot of these big firms to just snap up other companies at basically no cost to them. Whereas if you or I tried to do it, we were still paying 5% interest or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And now it's 10% on a small business loan or whatever. So they had a big advantage. Now, there were various valid reasons. There were things like know your client, right? That happened after 9/11. And then there was know your vendor, which happened after 2008. And they sound very reasonable. You know, we should be preventing nefarious actors from ruining our economy. But sometimes it's just an excuse. People use things as an excuse to not do anything, right? You just said it, right? It's like, I already have Microsoft on my approved vendor list. We already spend $100 million every year on that company. If they come out with an AI chatbot to help me scan emails for critical client things, I may as well just pull out $1 million or 2 million out of my budget and throw it on that, then give it to a startup that is trying to address the same issue, and that just means less work for me
Well,
as a procurement person.
I mean, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was working sales for a small company, and he
Mm,
painted the picture that sometimes small companies would go in, they would pitch this brilliant new idea, this brilliant new concept
yeah,
to the customer. They'd be cheaper than the big competition. They would be better,
yeah,
but then the big competition would just say, "Oh, go on, then we'll drop our price, or
yeah.
whatever. We'll throw in this, we'll throw in that," and the customer would say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go with the safe option. Nobody got sacked for buying IBM or whatever
Yes.
is the old phrase."
Yeah.
Um, but they'd used the small company as a stick to beat a
Yeah.
better deal out of the big company.
Correct.
But then the small company would go out of business because if it's they
So
create
that part hasn't changed, and in fairness, it's a little bit of the sort of proving yourself and paying your dues and so on. It isn't always fair. Sometimes it is a better solution, and yet it still doesn't win, and we end up living with a sort of a half baked. It's
yeah,
the thing that they got for the big vendor gave me, so I've just got to live with it. Um, I maybe it was around 2018. I remember doing a speech at one of the FIST. I was moderating a panel actually at one of Credit Suisse back at 11
right,
Madison in those days, and I brought this up as a topic, and I said to everybody, I said, you guys complain because most of the clients that say would be buyers, whatever, right? Most of the people sitting there. You complain about Bloomberg morning, noon, and night, and yet we roll in with all these alternatives and you never buy them. So, you're right. It doesn't do everything Bloomberg does. It might not even do 1/10 of what Bloomberg does, but the little thing that it does do is definitely better. Right. And do you want that or not? And they would say, we'll just go with what we got. And, don't get me wrong, Bloomberg's a great company and unbelievable product. But, there are areas where the industry could make an effort, in my view, to say, well, why don't we get, we'll look at some of these, and there are a lot of them, so they're going to have to filter them out and so on. But let's try to support a few more. Let's come up with a new procurement
nurture,
process. Yeah,
yeah.
let's come up with a better way that we go. Like, look, which track are you in? Oh, you're a startup, right? We have this process of doing things, and a lot of firms say they have it. They have an innovation lab and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, every time I talk to them, they're under the same going, do more with less, cut costs, spend less, don't buy anything if you don't have to. They're not, they're still under the constraints that the
And I mean
big
that
company has.
whole cost cutting that I mean
Yeah.
I grew up selling in the 80s and the 90s, which was a great
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Yeah.
where you came from, Tibco, and that. I mean, if there
Yeah.
was new stuff, I mean, when
Oh,
I was selling Triarch,
rocket ship.
we didn't charge for maintenance. I don't think, or we did charge for no, we charged for maintenance 10%,
Yeah.
but there were new product enhancements all the time, which we just gave
Gave
away.
as part of maintenance, you get them. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that was it, part of maintenance.
Yeah.
But because frankly, we were making all our money from new sales, we didn't
Yeah.
need to make money out of the customers that already bought it.
Yes.
But I think that in the modern world, there's just this, you know, uh, trying to, vendors, the sellers of
Yeah.
the world trying to make more money out of the diminishing expenditure of some of these banks or whatever. It's not the Wild West that it used to be. The banks
It
aren't as desperate to have the next best thing
no,
as they
but
were 20, 30 years ago.
and again, I think a lot of that consolidation that all happened in the low interest rate environment and bringing them together has sort of changed the need for having these cutting edge, solutions or new approaches to doing things. Now, look. it's still a pendulum. It swings over and back, right? And much as it's still, I think, on the way against small firms in our industry, anyhow, right, towards bigger firms. I think that that will turn around, right? Somebody is going to come up with something that is just going to be so much better. And somehow they'll keep enough control and equity and all the rest of that business that they can turn it around. And, there are some modern day examples where it's worked out, right? Jeff Sprecher did it with ICE, ended up buying the New York Stock Exchange and IDC. So, but again, that was
And
still 30 years ago, really.
yeah, we haven't seen the new.
Nowadays, we'll see, right? In our industry, but I think there's, it happens. People, I know from talking to all the clients, like they're putting up with a lot of stuff in their environments. They're not happy about it, but they have to, so they're putting up with it. And I think being able to give them, somebody is going to invent something that's going to change the game so much that they'll jump on board, and hopefully we'll start to see more people then doing that and
I,
making progress with
I
it.
mean, I suppose this is all part of the same conversation. In terms of when you're out there selling on behalf of your clients and
Mm-hmm.
advising them, and your teams that are out there selling. I mean, in the modern 2026 world,
Yeah.
how do you do that? And I'll throw in a few sort
Yeah.
of observations. There's so much more of this professional procurement world now, procurement
Yes.
departments. And then there's also something that never existed when I was selling Telerate,
Yeah.
which is the market data team. When I was selling Telerate, I would go directly to the end user, the head of
Yeah.
treasury or whatever.
Sure.
Occasionally there was a communications manager, but there wasn't that middleman. I mean, market data teams have now become very sophisticated,
Mm-hmm.
and one could harshly call them gatekeepers, but then they provide a real service. They stop salesmen going straight to the dealing room floor and winding up dealers who don't really understand what they're buying or whatever. I mean, how
Sure.
does the process work? I mean, how do you, if
Yeah.
you're training up a new, salesperson who's got to go
Yeah.
out and sell to these big,
Yeah.
sell side banks, bulge bracket banks, or asset managers or whatever? How do you describe
Yeah.
and explain how
Yeah.
best to integrate with
Sure.
that ecosystem?
So I think there are probably two different approaches, right? The first one that has really grown a lot since your time in sales, and even a lot of my time, is that buyers now are self-educating a lot more. So they are using ChatGPT, but they go to the website, they research, they go to events, they're talking to their friends, they're doing a lot of work before they ever engage with a salesperson. And so you really only, I think, have two ways of getting through to people. One is to do an outbound campaign, and this is where you're trying to leverage modern internet technologies to figure out who are your target audiences and then get your ads in front of them and try to generate interest so that, you can call the person. They say, "Oh, I'm interested in that. Sure, send me some stuff." And then you can generally, in those types of cases, especially where you have a pretty mature, well-defined product, you can enable a relatively junior salesperson to be successful by giving them the kit, right? You say, look, this is when they call back, you ask them these questions, you suggest these solutions, you try to determine their position in the organization. You can give people a bit of a roadmap or a guidance on how to do that. And because the client's already self-educated so much, they're probably willing to put up with a junior person and just say, well, we'll just make sure you bring the engineer or the technical person or whoever knows the data really well. We'll have this because I've read enough that I know I'm very interested. So you can get away with a less experienced salesperson. The other
I
way is
Yep.
yeah. Sorry, did you
Keep
want
no,
to?
keep going, keep going.
Okay. The other part then is, can you get in at a higher level? And, the premise that I've held with USAM and that, has been working for us over the last 10 years is that you can, if you're going in with experienced and knowledgeable and well-networked salespeople. So I don't think that aspect of selling has gone away, the stuff that you used to do and that I used to do. It's just that it's much, much harder to break through. So you have to have that starting position where you know the person already. You have a relationship. You know they have problems. Like, I guarantee you, every single person in the market data business has some list on their, goals for 2026 that they don't yet know how they're going to solve, and everyone in procurement is told, yeah, we're going to have to, get such and such a thing. This is the area we're dealing with. We need to get solutions to this problem. And so they're coming into the year starting to do their research and figure out what approach they're going to take. If you know them, you can give them a call and you can say, well, what is the thing you were, oh yeah, listen, I might be able to help you out. And you can have that
But how do you
conversation.
if you're new to the industry, how do you get to know people?
You go back to the original one where you have to be part of an organization that's doing the outbound, that's doing the marketing. It's, on the LinkedIn campaigns, it's on the events circuit, and you just follow along, you get sucked into it, and then they sort of guide you as you go. This is where AI is having a huge impact, but even with natural language,
Yeah.
forget it, just helping people to know how to interact. And, again, I think the procurement people are using it. So are the salespeople using it. Maybe it's going to neutralize itself,
Well,
but
I hadn't really appreciated something you just said then, because
hmm,
I do remember when sales was all about information. Salespeople were really useful because you could
yeah,
explain all this stuff to the customer.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
it's fascinating what you said, because AI and the internet
mm,
and all the information, so much information is available. The
yeah,
value of a salesperson explaining what something is sort of lost. And I suppose the next logical thing is, you know, taking products and making solutions. So like this product, that if you put them together this way
yeah,
and do this with them, it works
yeah,
as a solution. But at some point, AI is going to do that as well,
yeah.
or maybe it
Well,
already
it's
is.
certainly. I mean, look, I think AI. We're only scraping the surface at the moment. It's not as capable of doing that yet. Um, it will probably tell you, oh yeah, that version. Like I use it. I built for Cell Slicer. I built out all the back end, and I
Yeah,
was originally, just Google or search engines
yeah.
going to the coding sites, and they would have suggestions. So then, ChatGPT comes along, right? Give it a go. You know, it's 70% accurate, probably, right? It's good. It gets me in the right direction. But I often end up going back to Stack Overflow and reading the thread myself, because, no two solutions are ever identical, right? And that's one of the things where, engineers, like a proper pre-sales engineer and or a good salesperson, can understand. And like, the AI doesn't really know about your priority. And so you have to be very particular about prompting it. um, so, it could, well, yeah, you're right. You want to do that thing, but that's actually hugely complicated and going to be very expensive. How much benefit would you get? Probably only a little bit. Oh, okay. Maybe we could skip that one, because if we focus on these other big ones, these types of conversations, AI, I'm sure it will get better and better at them over time. But for now, there's still a good value into that. But it's mostly about listening. When you're a good
Yeah.
salesperson, it's about listening.
2 ears, 1 mouth. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
being told that.
And those are the tips and tricks. Like, if you just get an RFP and you try to answer the RFP, like, it has to have this and it must be able to do that and the other thing and include this data set. And you're like, oh, nobody does all those things. Nobody does all of them. And they're not all equally important, but the RFP doesn't tell you which ones are equally important or not. Right. And sometimes, like, the amount of times, even back in the 90s, when people would send an RFP, we'd be saying, but that's okay. That question doesn't even apply in our scenario or something, Like, for example, if they wanted a difference between TIB and Triarch, it'd be like, so how do you handle more than 100 connections on a server? And the TIB answer was, This is how we knew we weren't going to win the RFP, right? Because it was written
Written
for
by
Triarch.
yeah,
And I'm like, we don't actually connect to the server at all. How about that for an answer?
yeah.
But, the RFP wouldn't take it. So there's
That's-
still room. There's always going to be room for people. And it is always, look, sales decisions are emotional decisions, buying something,
yeah.
and much as there's more emotion, all right, like some people are falling in love with chat gpt, which I laugh at. I shouldn't really, but it's there's something about just meeting somebody, shaking their hands,
Well, I
getting
mean,
to know, hanging
I,
out.
I'm curious on that because again, my daughter will hate me saying this. She won't
Mm,
listen to the podcast. She's 28. She's in sales, cybersecurity, whatever.
nice.
But she spends her life um, on Zoom. It's
Yeah,
all Zoom. It would be Teams or WebEx and whatever.
sure.
And
Yeah,
I remember when I was in sales, it was going out and meeting people and those relationships. You could only do that if you got to know somebody and they could
correct.
trust you. But has that gone away? I mean, is that just us old fogies? I'm a very old fogey. You're a middle-aged
Yeah.
fogey.
Well, you look very well for
Oh,
your age, so
thank you.
if I
Thank
could
you.
be so lucky. No, I think so the practice of it has been reduced, but that's a mistake. Uh, it in my even at USAM, in my experience selling here, all of my biggest deals and all of my best deals have involved, extensive visits to the client site and meetings and drinks. But what I'm finding is they're less and less willing to meet me. And I have, I don't know. How do you crack that? You become friends, like,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
relationships, and you have to do it closer with fewer people, to maintain them, but that's not scalable either. So this is where, again, that combination of having a full campaign outbound and a junior level of team for those clients who are just going to buy because they asked an AI engine what the best solution is, right? And also having a certain number of more senior executives to certainly
So
where it
a
comes
mix.
at a point that they bring true value and give the client a level of comfort that they wouldn't get elsewhere.
Look, Fergal, we're not
Yeah,
quite at the hour, but we're sort of
yeah,
creeping up to this. Now, one of the things I always do to my guests is say, look, there are a million things we could have talked about, but we didn't
yeah,
get to talk about all of them. So if there were
right.
two or three, or maybe call it two big points, two big sort
Yeah.
of chips on your shoulder, or whatever it is that
No,
you want the world to know about, what are
yeah.
they? What are your two big points to finish off with?
No, so I've no chips on my shoulder. I'm very happy. Life's good. Business is good.
Yeah.
Can't complain. But if, the things that I would suggest um, is I would appreciate and do when my clients take the time to explore the innovative new things, even if they don't buy. I'm absolutely perfectly fine with them not buying. I'm not happy when they don't even take a look at it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm
But
like,
they're short of time. They must be so
they're
short of
short
time.
of time is a big one, and it's not a priority. Like, to have. Oh, I looked at a thing and we decided not to buy it. Right? Like, you know, it, it it's like those experiments that go wrong. And you're like, yeah, but if you do 1,000 experiments until you get the 1,001st that works. Right? It's like, yeah, okay, so why didn't you just do the 1,001st experiment?
Yeah.
Well, like, I didn't know. I had to go through 1,000 to get to the correct one, and so I think firms are absolutely missing out. And I think, look, it's there's so much change in the digital banking space and other areas that you could see a ground shift change to our whole industry, and the banks would be asleep as it's happening. You know, they so just you need to have a group, and you need to have an area. It's not even a group, to be honest. That's why I'm not, always, the innovation groups are fine, but the users are the ones. And you talked about this, like getting shielded from the users. It's like, but if you could use this, would it help you? And then how much would it help you? And if it's a little bit, then it's not worth it. But if it could change your life, then, take up arms and let's go and fight for it. And I think people should spend more time taking a look to go, like, what actually changes the game, as opposed to just what means I can go home at 5 o'clock today instead of 6.
And it's almost like the industry's got, especially on the buyer side, into this. They're very short staffed. I mean, they've been cutting back
Oh, yeah.
personnel. I mean, it was interesting.
Mhm.
You talk about the expenditure on market data, but then you equate that, how much do they spend on the market data teams? And they
Yeah.
don't spend a lot. And these
Yeah.
poor market data teams are under-resourced and rushing around chasing their tail.
Correct.
And again, I totally agree with what you just said. It's logical, but I'm also having enormous sympathy with some person saying, "Well, I can't stay
Got too
another
much
half an hour
time.
in the office to do that.
Yeah.
I've got to go and see
I
my kids."
I guess that's an area where maybe it's time to say, let's go back to the users again.
Yeah.
You know, like, we don't need to have, you go through these gatekeepers all the time before you get to the person that would use it. And, the first thing I always hear from my clients is, we already have that. And then, oh, okay. And then, either we can continue the conversation where we can pull out more about, oh, but does it do this or does it do that or handle the other? And it may or may not be the case that it does those things, right? Or I have to wait 6 months or a year, and then I get a phone call saying, hey, oh, I just bought this other thing. Like, I told you about a better
I,
solution a year ago, and now you tell me you not only did you not at the time you didn't have the problem, then you did, and then you didn't even think to call me.
I know I did.
So, the point being that I think there are firms that are willing to
An
do a little more
innovative
experimentation
mindset.
and innovate, and then those are going to be the better ones. You don't have to go crazy. We're not saying wire the entire organization, but you need to have people. I think it should be a goal to say, like, hey, you kept the business running, you made 20% profit or whatever the increase, and you innovated on one new area. Why
What is
not
it?
make it a goal?
They often have these phrases, is it like run the bank? And,
Yeah.
there's this sort of how much you spend on just keeping the lights on,
Yep. The
just
lights
keeping the
on. Yep.
status quo. And what you're saying is, well, what
Yeah.
about that edge? What about that extra
Yeah.
something? And maybe people just don't have the time or the space for it. But
But
that's
you look at
their
you look
loss.
at the results. The banks are making plenty of money, David. So,
Yeah.
why don't they have more people in market data?
And why don't they, again, just innovate a little? I am not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll get some pushback, and I want to have some pushback, and I want to hear
Yeah.
from people.
Of
Maybe we're
course.
missing something. Maybe there is a whole innovation going on here, and somehow we're missing out on it. But I haven't seen it as much. It does seem a much more conservative, with a small c, marketplace, playing it safe,
Yeah.
spending money on compliance, spending money on cost cutting, and not really looking for the cool
Yeah,
new
and
idea.
and as you say, I think a lot of the time and effort is going into consolidating into these bigger vendors and providers, and
Yeah.
put more and more things on the platform that they chose. And it's like, let's make it all be on Salesforce and Microsoft and Oracle or
Which
something.
there's a
Um,
logic to that, but it's a
there
longer
is
discussion. Fergal,
it is a longer discussion. Yes.
we're at the end. We're at the end. So, by the way, I
Excellent.
should apologize to you and apologize to the audience. I had an
Yeah.
electrician around here, so I'm running
All
this on
right.
my battery, but my lights were on the main, so I've got dark.
Uh-oh.
I'm glowing. It's a sort of
That's why
warm
you look so
glow.
good now.
Anyway, look, Fergal, it's been a pleasure. I hope to see you at some point soon. I'm not sure when I'm
I
getting onto your
appreciate it.
side of the pond, but thank you so much for doing
I enjoy
this.
it. Thank
And
you.
as I was warning you before,
Mm.
don't go away, because I'm going to stop the
Mhm.
recording,
Yeah.
but we still have to upload. Cheerio.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Take care.